Designers are a unique type of people because, besides a select few, they're really not known. They're not rock stars, they don't have reality shows, and you might be thinking, how can one person be so influential in my life? How can one designer do so much? Well, if you ever interacted with then you better believe you know Saul Bass. Saul Bass is an interesting designer because, unlike a lot of designers, he's transcended his medium. He took what he learned in one field and carried that over to another field. That's not an easy thing, and I have to hand it to the man because his logos are legendary. So much so that it took decades for any company to dare change their branding to the ill-fated, at least in my own humble opinion, new movement of logo design. But who is Saul Bass? Well, it wouldn't be that designer guy video without a little history lesson first. You have to understand where he came from. Born May 8th, 1920 in the Bronx, when Saul got a bit older, he worked at a deli and would hand paint signs for some of the food stalls and stores. A scout from the Art League saw his work and pretty much gave him a scholarship because of what he was producing. So he went to school 1 week a night for 6 months. He learned about layout design and was taught by the great Howard Trafton, who was a commercial artist specializing in illustration, typography, and lettering. He trained Saul to understand color and composition, something he would later execute in a genre-defining way. Back when he was going to school, there really wasn't a notion of design school. It was more fine arts or commercial arts. So in a lot of ways, he was a pioneer in that field. And in fact, a lot of what design teachers or mentors tell you about logo design or composition probably came from Saul Bass to begin with. He wanted to work in the commercial arts field, and so he got to work walking the streets of New York. Literally. He walked the streets of New York. He would seek out design studios or advertising agencies and started on 42nd Street near the East River and ending around the 47th Street area. Saul said it took him about 3 months to finally get a gig. In an interview, he said he actually lied quite a bit on his resume, so much so that he had to keep notes, so if someone called him, he knew which lie to keep lying about. I probably wouldn't recommend this approach today, but hey, there's a lot of things I wouldn't recommend, like not hitting that subscribe button for more design history like this. But I digress. Let's get into the movies, because Saul sure did. One of his first roles within the industry was being a paste-up man for Warner Brothers in New York. Basically, he put together ads for camera-ready shoots. This was way before exporting to PDF, obviously, and where the term camera-ready art came from. He then started doing layouts for 20th Century Fox, but became very frustrated within the industry because he hated how movies were marketed. More specifically, their poster designs. He called it the potpourri of art. These posters were designed to please everyone, and in doing so, had no real defining characteristics. Honestly, you can look at all these and never get a mood or feel for any of these films. In putting everything into design, there's nothing. These were paintings, art, they didn't sell the product. He later took a role with the Blaine Thompson agency at a 50% pay cut. I mean, ouch. But he didn't want to work on movie advertisings anymore, so he was more than happy to do so. At the firm, he met a Hungarian-born author, designer, and teacher with a class at the Bauhaus of Chicago and I believe in the Brooklyn College. Show off. He helped Saul with his craft and making him an even better designer. And in 1946, Saul was offered a job in Hollywood, again, to become an ad man or pitch man. Although he actually said he regretted that decision, saying it was difficult in Hollywood. Anyway, jumping ahead a little bit, in 1952, he created his own agency as he had become a well-sought-after graphic designer. He met his wife Aline in 1956 when she was hired to work at Saul's office, and the two hit it off. In 1961, they got married and had 2 children. They would later consult together on some pretty famous movie titles. Saul was first and foremost a designer, and like most designers, he had opinions. Famously saying in an interview in his later years, he wanted everything to be beautiful. He didn't care if the client thought it was worth anything. It was worth it to him. It's the way he wanted to live his life. He wanted to make beautiful things, even if nobody cares. When he was tasked with something, he was going to make it the best thing anyone has ever seen, period. And when we get to his logos and the legacy behind them, you'll understand he wasn't wrong. But first, let's go back to the film industry. Saul was considered the creator of modern film title sequences. Before his involvement, a lot of title sequences were just essentially PowerPoint slides. List the title, the cast of characters, and maybe you'll have a graphic or especially typeface. But that was pretty much it. What Saul did was create a story, a prologue within the title sequence. He used iconography, color, sound, and emotion to what the audience should experience or expect from the film. And he was actually known on some films to outdo the actual movie with his title sequences. One of his first major breaks was with the film Carmen Jones. Remember how he hated that potpourri aesthetic? This is light years from that. It sticks to black and white with a striking red that's mostly on the character, representing fire, lust, and heat. Finally, you have a feel for what this movie is. That one color gives you a mood and understanding. And put this next to all those other posters, and you'll see, even though this has the least amount of color, graphics, or text on it, it stands out from the crowd. It's unique, it's designed. And this poster, the man with the golden arms, started his career into animation and title sequences, even more so. Some even say this was the film that made him the movie title sequence guy to have. Once he had the design, he thought, wouldn't it be interesting if it moved? So he took that graphic, that poster, and turned it into a minute-long title sequence. The title sequence isn't just translating the movie poster into animation either. He wanted it to look frantic. He created a climate for what the movie was going to be about, connecting that poster with the movie or a brand identity. And you can see from Carmen Jones to the man with the golden arm, he was honing in on this new trade, but it didn't always stay within animation. Take Spartacus for instance. The title sequence started telling a story. The head cracking and falling apart represented the fall of the Roman Empire. St. Joan with the iconography of a broken person and religion. The corpse outlined an autonomy of a murderer. Such Good Friends had that sultry look. Evidence and Consent kind of showed hidden truths. Vertigo had that dizzying effect, almost terror-like. These posters were so simple but told the entire synapse of the movie in one or two icons. We didn't need fancy paintings or murals or text dumps. No, movies just needed a designer. Saul was inspired by the Bauhaus movement, and he brought principles of that movement to his posters. He believed legibility was king, so he used limited shapes, primary or pastel colors, basically iconography and color theory to tell a story, stronger than anything in the past. And when he created the poster for The Shining, he did about 300 drafts till we got this. And this is just iconic. We all know this poster. We all know this font. I mean, look at what the TV show gave us, but even the original book. The poster gives us so much more vibes than the book or the TV show could ever do. The sense of dread and fear is unmatched. And when you start looking at his work, you'll start seeing Saul Bass designs everywhere from your past and present. Your pop culture, your nostalgia was designed in part by Saul Bass. He also directed or influenced a lot of scenes in famous movies. In Spartacus, he was the visual consultant and designed key elements of the gladiator school and storyboarded the final battle. In Grand Prix, he storyboarded, directed, and edited all but one racing sequence. In West Side Story, Bass filmed the prologue, storyboarded the opening dance sequence, and created the end title sequence. But maybe the most iconic film is what he's best known for. Alfred Hitchcock wanted Saul to do the shower sequence and the discovery of the mother's skeleton. Spoiler alert, so Saul storyboarded and directed those sequences. He then worked with the editor to edit those sequences. Essentially everything but the stab in the stomach and the blood splatter on her face was a Saul Bass original. Alfred added those parts, of course. And it's not like his creative style went out of fashion. Modern films and TVs copy him to this day. Look at movies like Catch Me If You Can or even Monsters, Inc. Look at Feud or Mad Men. These are all inspired by Saul Bass. The man still lives on today. And not just from his past work, but from creating new title sequences, or at least inspiring new designers to do what he did. And in return, Saul Bass is still interacting with your lives. But with every start of a story, there's always an end. And his last movie that he created a title sequence for was Casino, a year before he passed away. April 25th, 1996, he passed away in a Los Angeles hospital at the age of 75. But there was a sequel or spin-off of sorts because while he created some great posters and title sequences, he influenced some of the most well-known and iconic companies in the world. Saul Bass's logos were a reflection of the time. The mod scene was in full effect. There were new design movements. The 60s, the 70s were a huge time for design. New technology, new social structures, and in the front of it all was Saul Bass. This was a fast-moving era as well. On Monday, you could look like the most technological company in the world, but by Friday, you look straight out of the industrial age. So using these terms, let's talk about the Bell logo and his famous pitch video. This pitch video really does show how his mind worked, and I urge you to check it out when you can. Link below for your viewing pleasure. But the recap is, if the icon is strong enough, no matter how you change it, as long as it has that resemblance of the original logo, the consumer, the client, will know and remember who you are. Now, the Bell logo lasted all the way till the company became AT&T, which Saul also created in 1983. You kind of see the similarities? As we talked about before, the thing Saul looked out for was legibility, iconography, and size. He kept brands simple because he wanted them to be iconic. Logos also needed to live in multiple locations. So if it worked on a large billboard or side of a truck, it needed to work just as well on a pen or stationery. You might also notice a lot of his branding is simplistic in color, and that's because he knew the printing process, and that simplicity is king. Sometimes you might be able to showcase a logo in full 4 colors, but a lot of the times you're going to have 1 or 2 colors. That's why the shapes were always so simple. His logos were versatile, they were utilitarian, they were flags, a symbol, an icon of the company. Logos are meant to be support for any other advertising, and as so, needed to be versatile for whatever medium it was attached to. Saul Bass understood that. Another interesting thing he showed off in the Bell pitch video was stripes. Additional complementary colors and graphics to the logo. He called these the stripes of a football team. They're iconic. The stripes and colors are the first thing people notice in a game, not the logo. Let me explain. If you're sitting in the stands, you know who the team is because of the color and stripes. You can't see the logo that well, and that goes for driving down the highway or lost in a crowd of people. So all vans, uniforms, and other items had these stripes on them. The logo for Bell complemented these stripes, these colors. The two worked hand in hand and got to the point where if the logo disappeared, you knew what company it was because of the stripes and colors. Look at this for example. These 2 restaurant colors. You kind of already know what restaurants these are based on the color, even if you don't see the logo. But now let's add the iconography or stripes to these colors without the actual words. Now you really know what these 2 brands are. Same concept for the Bell stripes. Saul once said, things that we know so well, we cease to see them. So deal with them in a way that we can understand them again. Make the ordinary extraordinary. That's why some people say the old Verizon logo is better than the new Verizon logo, and why Gap quickly went back to their logo from the 90s when they tried to change it in the mid-2010s. Although I see they recently changed it again. Anyway, in his lifetime and even after death, his designs, his ideas have touched so many people. How many of you have this poster framed or have a contract with AT&T? How many of you have taken a flight with United or watched Yogi Bear? How many of you swigged water out of one of these? Saul is a genius, a modern-day Renaissance man who shaped the modern world. Our lives are surrounded by these brands, these classic films, and while we enter a nostalgic haze or praise actors for the roles they play, hidden in the layout, the color, and the design is a graphic designer from the Bronx who just wanted to make beautiful things. Hey, thanks for watching. I noticed a lot of you got into my older video about brutalist design, and so I wanted to say welcome, and thanks for taking an interest in some of my stuff. I'm interested to hear who you think is an iconic designer, or an underdog or underappreciated creative. Let me know in the comments below, and until next time,